Yes, and you say that the old left collapsed and the new left that took its place was more concerned with social and cultural issues than economic ones.
That's right. If you look through the socialist publications, the Monthly Review, it's about really the people who've been left out of the capitalist economy. It's about racial minorities, ethnic minorities, sexual minorities, third world people, nations, exploitation. But there isn't the discussion of economic dynamics that you had a century ago when prior to World War I, the best economic analysis coming out of anywhere was by the Social Democrats. They were the people that saw that the system was run basically based on exploitation and was able to trace these things. You've had very little discussion of economic factors, even by the Marxists. Academic Marxism is very largely a discussion of dialectical materialism, philosophy. There's Marxist anthropology, Marxist culture, but there's very little Marxist economics.
Right, and what you've been describing, the way you've been describing the New Left, I think they call a lot of that identity politics now.
Right, that's exactly right. And in my day, what called itself the New Left before would just be looked at as bourgeois adventurism, or I don't know what you'd call it, but it was considered trivia as far as economics was concerned.
Well, right.
What you lack in the left is a perception that industrial capitalism has turned into something almost antithetical to it, and that's finance capitalism. There was a belief, there was a confusion on the left, promoted largely by the Monthly Review crowd, that monopoly capitalism was all part of the natural tendency of industrial capitalism to monopolies, and industrial capitalism and financial capitalism was a symbiotic dynamic, and that wasn't the case at all. If you read Marx himself, which I don't think the Monthly Review people did, you see that Marx was always juxtaposing industrial capital from finance capital, which he called fictitious capital. I see very little discussion in the American left about fictitious capital. When I go to other countries like China, I find much more discussion of what Marx actually wrote, and the socialist left in the United States never was particularly Marxist. That's an irony. When I grew up, I knew just about every socialist leader in the country, almost in the world if they came to this country. And often if I'd go to their houses, maybe a 10-year-old kid, I'd look at the very attractive red 3 volumes of Capital published by Kerr. And they were always unopened. And I asked even my father, who was one of the leaders of the Trotskyists, have you ever read these volumes? And he'd laugh and say, no, I actually never read them. So you had all these Kerr volumes that were always turning up at the used bookstores when the old guys would die, all unread. I used to find them at Strand Bookstore here in New York, and I'd always look at them to see if they'd ever been opened or if there were any marginal notes or anything. They were never read, never marginal notes, and I knew most of the economic book dealers and socialist book dealers, and I'd ask them if they had that experience, and they laughed and would say, yep, nobody ever actually read it. They'd put it on their shelf because everybody needed the Marx volumes on their shelf, but people didn't read it. And if they did read Marx, they'd read his political writings, a Communist Manifesto, and they'd read, if you look in the socialist bibliographies, very much since the 1930s, has all been cultural, and especially in the case of the Trotskyists, it's been largely about third world and racial minorities, not economics at all.
Yes, that's very interesting there, your experience with Marx's 3 volumes. I keep reading and hearing people talk about capitalism and what is going on now, as you have mentioned, as inevitable. This was predicted by Marx many years ago.
Well, Marx's idea was that capitalism itself was revolutionary. And that's what made him revolutionary. What made Marx revolutionary was his explanation that capitalism was revolutionary in transforming itself. And he thought that it was going to transform itself into socialism. And in fact, that banks would become industrialized and would become the main planning agents for an economy that was evolving into socialism. In a few passages, he made fun of the very thought that banks could do what they've done under Mr. Obama and turn into something autonomous and independent from capitalism. And Marx referred to usury capital and fictitious capital and described it as something that was almost impossible to expect. Now, in China, they've just begun to publish the World Review of Political Economy. The first issue just came out. It's distributed by Pluto Press, and it's published by the School of Marxist Studies at the Chinese Academy of Sciences. And I have a long article in that describing the financialization of real estate and industry. And in the forthcoming Critique magazine, which is a Marxist publication in Britain, I have a long discussion of Marx's description of the evolution of industrial capitalism into finance capitalism, the financialization of industry, basically. So I have all the quotations there, and they can get more quotations in the articles that I've written on my website, where I show how the whole political fight of the 19th century towards progressive reform has been inverted into the exact opposite of what it was back then.
Can you talk generally about the state of the Latvian economy, and is Latvia being held up as a model for other countries of Europe?
The European governments have told Greece, why can't you be like the Latvians? Why are you fighting back? The Swedish banks call Latvia the domino that can bring all the rest of the indebted countries down. Latvia is on the Baltic, right between Estonia and Lithuania. Its GDP has fallen by over 20% in the last year and a half. I'm chief of a committee of experts for the Renew Task Force Latvia. If you Google Michael Hudson in Latvia, you'll see it. And they just had the meeting of the Concord Center Party, and they published our proposed reforms in the Latvia Renewed. It's on a website, RTFL, Reform Task Force Latvia. Here's the situation. Real estate prices there have fallen by about 70%, worse than anywhere else in Europe. In Europe and in Latvia, even in England, if you take out a mortgage and the price of your property falls below the mortgage, you can't just walk away like you do in the United States. You're personally liable for the difference. So one example that was in the newspaper Diena in Riga when I was there, a woman borrowed took out a mortgage for 40,000 lots. That's about $80,000. It's almost $2 per lot. To buy an apartment. She was a public employee. The government cut back employment as part of its campaign to lower public sector wages by 30%. So she lost her job. She couldn't pay the mortgage, and the bank foreclosed and sold her apartment for only 7,500 euros. That's from 40,000 euros to 7,500 euros. And that's about $55,000 loss that she had to make up. Having lost her home, the bank now says, well, now you have to spend the rest of your life paying off the $55,000 debt to make the Swedish banks whole. Most of their debts are owed to Swedish banks. Now, a few years ago, obviously the bank had overlent for the apartment. It had lent her too much money without warning about what was going to happen. Well, a few years ago, the bank examiners of Latvia said, our job as bank examiners is to keep the bank solvent. So they went to the banks and said, look, you don't have to back your loans by the value of the property anymore. Back them by the income of the person that is taking out the loan. And make sure that you not only have the individual homeowner liable, make sure that their sons and their daughters, their fathers, their mothers, their aunts, their uncles, their nieces, and their nephews all countersign. Get as many to countersign as you can so that when you foreclose, you can just wreck a whole family. You can grab all the property and sell off not only of the debtor, but the entire family. And that's what's happening. That now there are many cosigners of the loans. Most Latvians got family members to cosign for the loans, and now the family members are saying, well, I'm sorry, your cosigner couldn't pay the loan. We sold the property at a distressed price. Now we're going to grab your property and sell it. And now we're going to attach your salary. And now you're going to have to, work for starvation wages. Well, the result is, since most of the Latvians who took out loans were well-to-do, you're having Latvian businessmen and their entire families move out of the country, emigrate, just to avoid a life of debt peonage. And so you're having a depopulation. The marriage rate in the last 2 years has fallen way down. The fertility rates, the rate at which they have children, is falling way down. They can't afford to get married. They can't afford to have children. The young people are leaving the country because there are no jobs. This is the situation that occurs when you have a class war of finance against the rest of the economy. And it's not a class war of industry against labor because industry can't really survive under conditions where you have a tax system where there's over 50% tax on employment. There's a flat tax there of over 50%. Property is taxed at 0.1%. So Latvia has the highest tax on employment in the world, the lowest tax on property in the world, and the result is economic collapse. And that is what is being held out as the model for Greece, Spain, Portugal, Italy, Ireland. They're all saying, why can't you be like Latvians? Why can't you starve in the street quietly and just emigrate and leave? And this is a crazy situation. So we've come out with our proposal saying, look, this insistence that European countries either devalue or they slash government spending and impose an austerity program is a false choice. You can cut the cost of labor in half, indeed, not by reducing wages, but by stopping taxing wages and shift the tax onto the land. In other words, onto the property that has been pledged to the banks and the property that, quite frankly, a lot of kleptocrats have taken over throughout the post-Soviet economies. So this October, the election is going to be fought over this issue of who are you going to tax, wealth or labor? Are you going to rebuild Latvia and the Baltics and the other post-Soviet economies, or are you going to finish the Cold War by just stripping them, wrecking them, and causing the largest demographic crisis since World War II? That's what the election will be about.
And when is the election?
October 2nd.
I'm speaking with financial economist and historian Dr. Michael Hudson. Today's show, Europe's financial class war against labor, industry, and government. I'm Bonnie Faulkner. This is Guns and Butter. Now, isn't this the same sort of thing that's happening in Greece? I mean, in terms of the economy.
Latvia has an option that Greece doesn't have. Latvia has its own currency, the lat. Now, it's stabilized the lot vis-a-vis the euro very closely, but it has the option of redenominating the debts in its own currency if it wants and devaluing them if it wants. And there's another fact, and that's also when the neoliberals designed the Latvian economy, one good thing they did was put in the best Consumer Protection Act that I've seen anywhere in the world. It certainly is as good as anywhere else. And the act says that if a bank makes a loan without disclosing the risk to the borrowers, and that would include the cosigners, the loan is nullified. So we're asking the government to bring a class action suit on the behalf of the mortgage owners and the cosigners to say, look, Any bank that did not explain the risks of devaluing the euro, the risks of losing the job, the risks of the co-signers having a lifetime of debt peonage in front of them, had their loan annulled. Well, you can imagine what this is going to do for the general election. People finally see that it doesn't have to be this way. They don't have to be impoverished. They don't have to be driven out of the country. Latvia is a sovereign nation, and a sovereign nation can do whatever it wants, and that's the choice that countries really have. Are they going to run the financial system for the economy, or are they going to run the economy for the banks, which in Latvia's case are the foreign banks, mainly Swedish banks?
Well, are the candidates running in the election that are going to take on this platform, do you think?
Yes, the Concord Center Coalition is supporting this, and it's basically the Harmony Center, Concord Center Party with